Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 20 of Radio 815. I am your co host, Matt Crandall, here as always with Marcelo Inostroza, the podcast dedicated to J.J. Abrams, his work, and the extended Bad Robot universe. Right now, we are talking Alias Season 4. Last week on the podcast, we talked about the season premiere, Authorized Personnel Only, Part 1. This week, we're taking a look at the first half of Season 4, episodes 2 through 11. This season of Alias was most notable for Season 3 kind of got off the rails, and JJ said they felt that they were more plot driven and not true to the characters. He stepped in, wrote the first 2 episodes of the season to steer them in a new direction. And because of Lost as its lead in and Desperate Housewives being such a hit, Alias got to run basically from January all the way through with only 1 week off. So it really got a lot of forward momentum from not having any repeats, and people got to just watch the story unfold without having to guess what time it was on, which was good for the ratings. Story wise, this first half of the season is a little bit all over the place, starting with the continuation of Authorized Personnel Only. Like I said, the last script that JJ would write for this, where we find out that the secret file that Sydney read at the end of season 3 is not really that earth-shattering, but also seems a little bit off. It says that Jack has killed Irina Derevko in his downtime that we didn't see. He went on some mission and killed Sydney's mother, which really feels like a weird thing to be in that file, a weird thing for Lauren to have known about, to direct Sydney to that file. So also, when Sydney was reading that, it's supposed to be some sort of earth-shattering thing that changes her entire worldview, but Jack killing Irina doesn't feel like that to me. It does feel like a betrayal because Sydney and her mother still have this weird, estranged relationship. But because she wasn't in any of season 3, I feel like to just say like, "Oh, she's dead now" is such a cop out. That was really frustrating. And the other highlight of this episode is that as everybody is getting sucked into APO, Marshall gets recruited and he finds out that everybody is still part of it. And his reaction when he gets to APO and he sees Sloan and he goes, guys, Sloan is here. Did you guys notice that Sloan is here? And they're like, yeah, we know Sloan is here. So that part was good, but that whole file thing just felt like at the end of season 3, the writers set something up, and whatever it was, JJ was like, no, that's not it. We'll just switch it to something and move on, and get over it pretty quick, because it's not even something that Sydney dwells on the entire first half of the season, only the first couple of episodes, and then they sort of advance past it.
I really was intrigued when they set that whole thing up, starting with the finale for season 3. You know what was in the file, the program that Sydney was a part of or wasn't a part of, and when they ultimately revealed that Jack had a part in Irina's death, I call bullshit. That thing was like the biggest crock of shit I could have ever heard. I was like, that's a giant waste of time. I know she's not dead. I know she's gonna come back, and that's a giant waste of time. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, for this first half, there were things that I enjoyed, but for the most part, like you said, I did feel that this first half of season 4 was meandering a little bit. Like I thought that they did a bad job of focusing the story to the point where I wasn't really that invested. I mean, there were some things that I enjoyed and I was invested in. Like, for example, you guys may remember last season I criticized Vaughn for not being that overly emotional when he found out that Lauren betrayed him. One thing that I did like is that in one episode, early on in this first half, Vaughn deals with a young woman, and he basically tells her that because of what he did to Lauren, he's suffering for it, and he's finally dealing with it, and he's finally showing some conflicted emotions towards that whole thing with Lauren. So I did appreciate that, just based on the fact that I thought that the writers last season dropped the ball on that, and I love the fact that they decided to pick that up to a certain extent. The other thing that I really enjoyed is something really minor, and it's really something small, and it's only something that people that love J.J. Abrams, like you and me, would pick up on. But in the episode when, for some weird reason, Sydney and her sister, I can't remember her name right now, I'm sorry,
Nadia.
decide to have, I'm sorry?
Nadia.
Yeah, they decide to have a party in their house. And at one point in the party, Sydney and I think it's Vaughn who step outside, and they start talking. But when Nadia opens up the door, can you
tell everybody?
When that happened, I lost my shit. And that can only happen if you guys know a little show that we're going to start talking about here very, very shortly. And I just lost my mind.
Yeah.
Because I love shit like that. I'm like, the second that happened, I was like, drive shaft, drive shaft, drive shaft. You know, again, you guys won't understand what that is unless you've seen Lost. But I love that JJ's universe, or what we've affectionately called it here, the Bad Robot universe, has those little touches with Slusho, with Drive Shaft, with the Big Evil Corporation from Cloverfield. Mm-hmm. Those organizations, and the number 47 is all over JJ's work. And for me, for a guy who's been a fan of JJ for a while, for me who likes stuff like that, and for a guy who likes Easter eggs, that was just really fulfilling and really fun. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I did like is that they decided to do some more character development with Vaughn this season, in reference to his father wasn't the person that he thought he was. Now, for a second, I was like, did they have to do that? Because we did mention in a previous episode that I believe it was you, Matt.
Everybody's extended family is a spy or a double agent or whatever.
I really like the fact that we finally got to learn something about Vaughn, and we finally, I'm really interested to see where that ends up going. Mm-hmm. I did enjoy the stuff with Dixon not feeling so comfortable with Sloan, and him having to tap Sloan's house phone, his office phone, and I think he tapped his car phone. But I did like the fact that, despite the fact that we have basically the gang back together, Dixon still feels that Sloan has an end game. And I like the fact that because of Dixon's worry about Sloan, that almost backfired in their face, and that almost cost Jack his life. And also, I like the fact that Jack is still keeping secrets from Sydney. I did say earlier that annoyed me, but those little things that I mentioned, the JJ Easter eggs, the Vaughn father stuff, and Jack's behavior is really the only thing that really kept me intrigued in this first half. I know I should be invested in the Vaughn and Sydney relationship garble, but I think I'm really over that.
I think they put that on the back burner quite a bit, though, because even when, Vaughn is having this character development, him and Sydney romance is not part of the show, even though they are together or whatever. Like, it's not like we get a lot of scenes of them hanging out and being lovey-dovey. It's taken a backseat completely.
I was really struggling for things to be invested in this first half, and I really had a problem with the fact that there wasn't any I felt that there wasn't any central focus. I felt that we weren't really going towards anything.
Right. Especially the way that the plot had been handled in previous seasons, it doesn't feel like there is a straight through line and like a clear, this is where they're heading kind of endgame. And some of those like one-off episodes of this are better than others. Like I didn't really care for the one where Sydney gets in contact with that infectious drug, which is kind of like the Alias version of like a zombie episode where, you know, she gets bitten and they got to find the cure and she's got these hallucinations. And that whole episode, other than the awesome scene that you mentioned where Dixon confronts Sloane, like it just felt like a bridge too far. Like they were getting a little bit away from what makes the show good. But I loved that scene with Dixon where he says to Sloane, you know, the reason I never saw through SD6, the reason I never even suspected is because I didn't realize anyone could be such a big piece of shit like you are to have true evil motives and fool all these people. But I love that he says to him, like, but that's not true this time. Like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. You know, I will be waiting for you. I will be watching. And no matter when you think you've got one over on me, you don't. And Carl Lumley in that moment, and even Ron Rifkin as Sloane, like that was like some of the best acting they both have done in this series. And I thought that scene was one of the best scenes of this entire first half. The other thing I really liked in terms of Mission Impossible-esque was the episode 5, Welcome to Liberty Village, where Vaughn and Sydney are brought to that village located in Russia that resembles an American town, where they're going to be training for like a terrorist cell and they go undercover. And that was very similar to like a Mission Impossible sort of storyline. But I love that it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith and the Americans kind of, you know, wrapped into one in that moment where they are trying to pull one over on these people, but they are actually already agents, and their cover gets blown. And then it ends with a ridiculous helicopter crashing into a house because of an EMP. And it was like so over the top and fun that it was like one of those great kind of diversion episodes where everything else didn't matter. And then for the last little bit to sort of pull me back into caring, we get that 2-episode arc with Anna Espinosa, Gina Torres is back, and Sark figures into those 2 episodes quite a bit. And it deals with the Rambaldi prophecy about Sydney and Nadia and how the 2 sisters will confront one another and only one will make it out. And I thought that brought us back to the sort of the Alias flavor that they had already established through most of the other seasons. That 2-episode arc really was more what I hoped the rest of the season would be, where we still are dealing with some of this mythology and the familiar characters come back for one last, you know, hurrah before they disappear for the rest of the season. So that stuff I really enjoyed. And I did notice there were a couple of good guest stars in this first half, but not as many as they've had in the past. So Jason Segel, you know, his rise to fame, is in episode 11 as the American guy that Sydney sort of screws over on her mission and then has to help. Kelly MacDonald from Trainspotting plays like a conflicted nurse in one of the episodes. And because I always mention people who were on Supernatural, in episode 4, Richard Sprite Jr., the trickster from Supernatural, is a guy that Sydney has a meeting with about a weapon. And whenever I see anybody from my other favorite shows, I always do that Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV moment. So those were sort of like the highlights for me, but overall, kind of a wildly uneven first half.
You mentioned that great Mission Impossible-esque episode where I think it's called Welcome to Libertyville. That episode is actually eerily similar to a Mission Impossible Season 1 episode called Contagion, where the IMF infiltrates a Russian training facility because they're gonna unleash Ebola all over the place.
Hmm.
So I really did appreciate that. You mentioned that things got better when Zoe came back into play. I say Zoe because I can never get a freaking name, and you know
Yeah.
this. Um, the thing that I latched on to in this season, because if you're listening right now, you're like, this guy didn't latch on to anything. Why is he talking about this? I did appreciate the relationship between Sydney and Nadia. I thought that the writers did a really good job at showing us that although Sydney is kind of mistrustful of Sloane, obviously, and is mistrustful of her father and is mistrustful of her mother, she does her best to make her twin sister feel as welcomed into the Bristow family as she can. Sydney from day one has been very compassionate, but it seems to me that when she's dealing with Nadia, for the most part, she's very, very compassionate and very, very loving towards someone who she didn't know existed until a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And I really appreciated that because me being a lonely child, I kind of love stories where I see siblings come together and sibling discourse and all that, because I never had that as a
Yep.
when I was growing up. So I appreciate stories that sprinkle that in wherever they can. So I did like that aspect of this season. But again, for the most part, I had a really big problem in that there was no real focus as to where the hell we're going.
Mhm.
And I do know that someone is coming, and I do feel that what Sloane and Jack are doing is interesting, but I'm like, okay, what's the end game here? Give us something, or show us, or give us an arrow to like what we're going. There's like nothing.
Right. They haven't tipped their hand enough yet. I do like that Jack and Sloane have something going on that we're still unclear about what it is. And I think you're totally right that last season when Nadia was introduced, she didn't feel like a full-fledged person. She just felt like a plot device to sort of add some drama to the mix. And this year they let her grow as a person and as a character where we actually start to get endeared to her and care about her a bit more. And part of that is the way that her rapport with Sydney is. And there's that episode where they both go on a mission together undercover to infiltrate that mob guy's girlfriend's hotel room. And I like that. And also having Weiss absolutely adore Nadia and sort of like fall in love with her. Makes us like her more, and she feels more like a fleshed out character this year rather than last year where it was just like they were throwing a wrench into the plotting by adding her on.
You mentioned the relationship between Weiss and Nadia. I really loved all that stuff. Like, I
Hmm.
kept thinking that the writers were gonna pull out the rug from the. I kept thinking that the writers were gonna pull out the rug from under me again, and
Yeah.
for some reason I thought that they were gonna kill Weiss. And if they killed Weiss, I would have been really pissed off.
Yeah.
I would have, I would have considered not doing the podcast anymore. But no, I kid. I would have been really pissed off. But I really like their rapport. Like, I really hope that they end up together.
Hmm.
But I don't know what's gonna happen with them. But I'm sorry I keep harping on this, but the lack of a overall I the lack of overall roadmap for this first half really bothered me, and which is kind of funny because I've never had a problem with Alias doing standalone episodes and doing episodes about this and episodes about that. But in the other seasons, they did that, but they sprinkled in clues to where we were going, and they sprinkled in clues to a bigger overall picture. And I feel that we didn't get that in this first half. I'm sorry I keep
Right.
harping on it, but I
Well,
just do.
and what's weird is, I mentioned at the top of the show that this was the first season that actually ran consecutive without like repeats. So it would have lent itself to having more serialized episodes. But I feel like there must have been, I don't know if it was an ABC mandate or like a JJ mandate where they said, hey guys, let's scale back a little bit of the week to week. You need to have seen every episode to know what's happening in this episode. Serialization of it so that new viewers could just jump in. Because it did start to feel a bit more like those, you know, you can watch any episode of CSI and it doesn't matter if you've seen the 800 before it. It felt a little bit like that, where they were trying to deserialize it or have the serialization be, you know, like 5 minutes at the start, 5 minutes at the end, but the 40 minutes in between you could enjoy if you hadn't ever seen Alias before, which actually makes the people who have watched all of Alias less satisfied and less content. But for people who are just changing the channel, they might latch on because then they see some cool, you know, spy mission with jets, some pop tune at the time, you know, blaring full blast, right? So it's a bit of give and take, and I don't know that they necessarily found the right balance for it in this first batch.
No, I don't think they found the right balance for it at all, because I was like, at one point I was like, do I really need to see this? I'll just watch the first 5 minutes and then I'll just skip to the last 5 minutes and I'll be fine.
Right.
This isn't as bad as the Lauren thing, because the Lauren thing was an astronomical mistake in my head. The Lauren thing almost made me want to stop watching the show. I got so pissed. But the fact that we are almost at the beginning of the end here.
Right.
And I'm like, guys, we're not focused. Like, what are we doing? Like, what can you just, I mean, Matt, you probably understand my frustration, but the last thing I'll say, I've said it already, but the major problem, at least for me in this first half, was the lack of investment, the lack of a secondary story big enough to keep me interested to see the rest. Now I'm going to see the rest, but I think that they could have done something a whole lot better. Right. And I'm really disappointed that they didn't do something better.
Yeah, it almost feels like they, in trying to broaden the appeal of the show, they actually diluted the appeal of the show, and they sort of missed the mark on what people liked about the show. And this is still like they don't know that they're in the end game yet, because I don't think that they realized that the next season was going to be the last while this is going on. But partly the reason the next season is the last is because this one does so much wheel spinning and doesn't have that forward momentum that, you know, a lot of the hardcore fans weren't happy with the direction. And I don't blame them, because yeah, it was fine, but there were lots of episodes where I was like, I bet I could just skip to the end and watch the next one and I wouldn't have missed any of the main stuff that you need to know.
The only thing that I'm really hoping will happen, we've hinted, or at least I've hinted at it in previous podcasts, and even Matt, you've hinted at it. I want Arena to show up again because I know she's coming. I don't know when she's coming. Mm-hmm. And I think that when she shows up, that is going to be the biggest piece of me being invested into the end of the show.
Right.
Because at this point, I'm like, guys, to get me back, you're going to have to do something. Like, to get me back, you're going to have to kill Sloane. And I know that doesn't happen to the end, but I need something to convince me that the end, which is coming, which we've said, I need something to hold me over as we get to the end here. Now, what are you looking forward to in the second half, if anything at all?
Well, and yeah, I am looking forward to stuff in the next batch of episodes. like you said, you're pretty sure that Irina shows back up, and we'll find out how that's possible and why. More of the drama with Vaughn discovering what may or may not have happened with his father and how that all goes down. Um, there's some big moments with Dixon coming up that I'm excited for as the Sloane and Dixon sort of entanglement continues. So they have set the table for a lot of good stuff. And honestly, it's been so long, 15 years since I've watched these episodes, that I don't remember the exact ins and outs of how this is going to go. So I'm looking forward to more of the good character-driven stuff, and hopefully a few more episodes with the fun Mission Impossible-esque action that Alias does so well when they choose to do it.
One thing I will say, I really thought that I was going to hate Nadia. Like, the only thing I can remember from my original watch of Alias, many, many moons ago, is that I hated Nadia. Like, that's the only thing I remembered. And I could say that the actress who plays Nadia is doing a wonderful job so far. I don't know what the hell I was on the first time I watched the show, but...
yeah, I like her more this time around. And I think part of it is that at the time, it just felt like, why are they doing this? Like, there was no real purpose to the character. It just felt like adding someone to kind of, I don't know, give Jennifer Garner a break for like a few scenes. But I'm finding on the rewatch, like, there's a bit more depth there. And certainly she is portrayed in a likable, fine way that it's not bugging me as much.
If I could backtrack here for a second, I'm going to just rewind here just to illustrate a point. In last season, when the big bad corporation was announced, right? I can't remember their name now. They were so forgettable. When the big bad corporation who supposedly kidnapped Sydney and supposedly made her a sleeper agent,
right?
That corporation really led to nothing. Like, I was expecting more out of that corporation and more because they built it up to be the replacement for the Alliance, and we've heard the name of the Alliance mentioned in this first half, but that big evil corporation just led to nothing. They were introduced, and like, I feel nothing came of it.
Part of that, I think, is JJ stepping in and course correcting, and they were mostly there to serve as part of Sloane's like redemption storyline, because he had dirt on that corporation, and part of his plea deal or whatever was involving that. So I feel like that was kind of like a red herring to getting Sloane back into the fold over the course of this. And they do mention the Alliance in these last episodes because they think that Sloane is basically trying to reassemble the Alliance in some new form, which of course just feels like, okay, they realized getting rid of the Alliance so soon was a mistake, and now they want to patch that back together because they wrote it out before they should have.
One thing I noticed, I did enjoy that. I think one or two episodes were written by Drew Goddard in this first half. That was cool. And for film fans like me and Matt, when we see the name Drew Goddard, we're just happy bells go off in our head.
And Drew's episode was the one where they go undercover in the village.
Oh yeah.
So it was like one of the best ones. He didn't write any others in this first batch. He's a producer now, but he writes more in the back half. But that was his one episode that he did write, was that one. That basically wraps up the first half of Alias Season 4. We will be back next week to chat episodes 12 through 21 as we start to move into the end game. Like I said, not necessarily of the series, because I don't think they knew that the year after was going to be the final, but certainly of wrapping up a lot of these story threads and hopefully moving us in a nice new direction. If you guys have any questions, comments, or anything, use the hashtag Radio815 on Twitter. We will get to your questions or comments. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm on Twitter at Matt Crandall. Marcelo, what's the best way for the people to reach you?
If you guys also want to get in touch with me and talk about Alias or Lost or the fact that we might get some more Bad Robot Easter eggs in the future, I'm also on Twitter. You can just reach me at CreekFanatic88.
All right. So only a couple of weeks left of Alias before we move to a deserted island far, far away. So until then, thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk back soon.